Good morning. Hello everyone. My name is John Caufield, and I'm an Australian, and I was an IELTS examiner actually in Bangkok with the IDP. Today I would like to give you a few short tips on how to improve your IELTS speaking and how you could possibly get a higher band score. Firstly, I think the most important thing is to speak naturally. You need to speak just like you're having a conversation with a good friend. It's not so formal. I often say to students, look, it's not a real examination, it's a conversation. So that means that you can use expressions that you would use talking to a friend. You can use expressions like, if the examiner asks you, do you like singing? Oh, yes. I'm really into singing. You don't need to say, oh yes I do, and blah blah blah. Just relax and try to be natural. Now of course you need to use some higher level vocabulary, but don't think you have to use big complicated words. Just the occasional word that you know about the topic, and that's my second tip, to use topic vocabulary, that is topic that's vocab that's related to the topic. So if you're talking about a good friend, you'll have some qualities of a good friend that you know, trustworthiness and honest and so on. Those are topic vocabulary, and that is important. But the most important thing is don't ever give the examiner a list of things. Focus in on just one of them and give some detail. So if it was qualities of a good friend, you know, some students, they mention 6 qualities. Pick one and go into it in some detail. It's a much better idea than just listing. And then you can use examples. Okay, so examples are very good. My third tip is examples, and in part 1, reasons and examples. Those are the 2 words that should be in your head. Because you know in part 1, the examiner can only say one word to you. He can say, why? So if you give an answer, if he says to you, do you like chocolate? And you say, oh, yes, I like chocolate. Or even better, I love chocolate. And you might even say, I eat it 3 times a week, but he's not happy with that because he will say to you, why do you love the chocolate? You see, the reason. It's the only time he will interrupt you in part 1, if you don't give a reason. So think quickly about a reason, and many times we can then follow with an example, a real example. You mentioned Mac Robertson's chocolate with hazelnuts in it. A real example. Okay. My next tip is about part 2. Try to tell a story in the middle of your part 2 talk. You've got 2 minutes. Many students struggle to get the 2 minutes. What I mean is a little anecdote. An anecdote is a little story within your story. It might be the examiner gives you the part 2. Describe a memorable trip that you went on. You can be talking about a class trip to the 𝐌𝐫 Mountains. And then, so you're talking about the preparation and on the way, and then you got to the entrance to the 𝐌𝐫 Mountain. Oh, and suddenly the teacher fell down the steps of the bus and broke his leg. Oh, and we didn't know what to do, but fortunately, we phoned the school and they said, look, get the bus to take him to the hospital. So a few of us went with him, and the rest of us continued on into the 𝐌𝐫. So we told a little story. It probably took 30 seconds, but we had 2 minutes. This little story enabled a lot more language and a lot more, made it interesting, instead of just a boring talk. Okay, so tell a little story, particularly if you have trouble getting up to 2 minutes. Okay, the other tip that I'd like to give you is the tenses. Now, some students are okay, but many students haven't mastered the use of the correct tense. The examiner's listening for the correct use of the past tense, because you know that most of your tenses, when you are in part 2, they're usually past tense. If you're talking about, something like a trip or something like that, make sure you've got plenty of practice at using the difference between past tense, the present simple, present continuous, and present perfect. They're the main tenses, and of course, with the future you can use will or going to. Going to is more relaxed and more natural. So we want to speak naturally, we want to use the correct tenses, but there's one other secret, and that is idiomatic expressions and idioms. You should have a couple of idioms in your speaking test. It may be a simple idiom, like when I got my result I was over the moon. It's a simple one, but it is used every day by Westerners, so it's okay to use it. Even like, what subject do you like at school? Well, I really love geography. I love learning about different countries and their mountains and rivers and so on. But I'd have to say, I'm not into maths like most of my fellow students. They're crazy on maths. You see, you've used idiomatic expressions to talk about what you like. You love this, but you're not into this. It's much better than just saying, I like this, but I don't like it. Okay, so idiomatic expressions are important. So I'd have to say, if we look for one word, it's be natural. Be natural, relax. Don't use too many formal expressions. And don't worry too much. Don't be too serious. Relax and try to enjoy. The examiners love to have students that have had a good interaction with the examiner, smiling and friendly and giving examples and giving reasons. And the examiner, for good students, don't forget, he will interrupt you. Many students worry that in part 3, and they come out and they say, oh, the examiner interrupted me, wouldn't let me finish my sentences. That's right, because maybe you're a good student, and the examiner wants to really test you and make sure if he's going to give you a good mark. He wants to make sure that you deserve it. So don't worry if he interrupts you in part 3. That's a good sign if he's interrupting you. Okay, so I hope those few tips will help you to get a higher mark. And first and finally, I'd just like to congratulate you on having decided to study IELTS, and I'm sure you'll pick a very good school and a good teacher to help you, because you do need guidance. You really do need guidance, particularly, in writing and in speaking. Okay? Thank you.